So much has been made about Dabo Swinney in the transfer portal, or honestly not in the transfer portal. I want to talk about that. But first, Brian, tell me how many people would never admit it out loud, but they 100% agreed with Tyler from Spartanburg when he made that phone call last year.
You shouldn't ask me that question because I'm going to spend most of this time laughing and trying to talk through the laughing response. A lot of people felt bad that they agreed with the guy. There was a lot of people who would comment about Tyler from Spartanburg and say, he shouldn't have said it. He sounded snarky. He shouldn't have done this. And they would give these long prefaces. And then they would say, but he was right about XYZ. Mm. That happened a lot in my comment section. I read it on other comment sections, on other forum boards. People were afraid to agree with Tyler from Spartanburg. Now, listen, when you hear that recording, did Tyler from Spartanburg sound like, James Earl Jones speaking or Denzel Washington with his deep voice and commanding? No, he didn't. He sounded just like your average everyday guy who was just calling up one of the winningest coaches in college football and saying, hey, man, what's the deal? And people said he should have had more respect for Swinney and not ask those questions. And I'm sitting there going, hey, listen, you may not like the tone of his voice. You may not like the way that he presented a lot of the airing of the grievances, so to speak. But he was right in a lot of the things that he said. So it created definitely a division in the Clemson community. And even to this day, you really don't bring up Tyler from Spartanburg unless you want to be seen as a fanboy of his. So.
Do you think it not motivated, but like Clemson was really good after that call happened. So, is that just coincidence? Is it, did it maybe light some kind of a fire of like, hey, I do need to pick things up, or did the schedule just get easier and they kind of won games out, or, anything to that?
Well, the very next game was Notre Dame, and Notre Dame was supposed to beat us.
Yeah,
I watched Notre Dame a lot. And what was kind of odd was Will Shipley was injured. Phil Maffa, now our starting running back, went out, ran the ball for like 35 times, 186 yards, put on a clinic, and that really turned things around. Now, the Clemson's defense played pretty much unbelievable all season long unless they got tired because they're human beings. But, the road was not that easy. After that call, you had North Carolina, Drake May, Omarion Hampton, Tez Walker coming into town. Then we had to get revenge on that unbelievably terrible loss by 1 point to South Carolina the year before. And just to throw this out there for your viewers, South Carolina hadn't beat us at that point in almost a decade. Poor coaching cost us that game. So I don't know if it lit a fire under his butt. I do know that the week before that, he had made some comments towards the Clemson fan base and said, there's 1.5% of the Clemson fan base who's criticizing me, but you're the problem. You're the problem. But the other 98.5%, oh, you're good people. And I was sitting there going, Swinney, you're a smart man. You know that you're reading everyone their rights. Then they go out and lose to NC State like they did right after that, and then the call from Tyler from Spartanburg happened on that Monday night. So I don't know how much it impacted him, but I will tell you this: whether people are mad at me for saying it or not, Tyler from Spartanburg was right on a lot of the things that he said, and it was stuff that people would whisper. They're afraid that the Clemson gods would hear it, and you would have your orange and white taken from you.
We've talked about this in other videos, but it's hard because you have a respect for the past, but it's hard to ignore the fact that they have lost 2, 3, 4 games in a row the last several seasons. And there seems to be a downward trend. There seems to be some cracks in the facade. As a Florida State guy, it reminds me incredibly of what the end of the Jimbo Fisher era looked like. Now, it just looked different on the field, but Florida State did the same thing. They won a national championship, and they lost 1 game, then they lost 3, then they lost 3, then they lost 5 his last year, and it looked like that same kind of trajectory. Is that how far down the path will Clemson go before they start to look to make a change?
I see. I'm a totally different Clemson fan than most. I'm a realistic fan, which means I, I I'm not going to just do the Clemson cheers and hum the Tiger rag every time somebody says something I don't like that just happens to be the truth. Uh, uh, for me, I don't think that firing Dabo Swinney is the answer. What Swinney needs, what he needs to do overall, revamp in 1 year. Don't do it every year. He's firing somebody and hiring someone. I hire that one guy. Now everybody be happy. See, I made a change. No, look at your defense and go, hey, they have a bunch of experienced coaches on that side of the ball. I might want to do that on the offense as a whole. Of course, Matt Luke was hired this past season, but Dabo Swinney needs to get back to that. He needs to get back to hiring really good coaches who know their stuff and developing these players. When he took over, he was taking guys that were 3 stars and putting them in the NFL. That's what made Dabo Swinney Dabo Swinney. And then, of course, what happened afterwards, we know what happened. But you're right, it's history. I am concerned. In fact, I will say this on your show for the first time. I think the 2024 season is the most important Clemson football season that we've seen in the past 25 years. Because if he goes back out there and he blows it, if he gets absolutely ran over by Georgia, and then y'all beat Clemson commandingly, and then we blow some game to some team we shouldn't, But I mean, we almost lost to Wake Forest on homecoming this year, folks. I mean, you got to remember that. I mean, we looked terrible. I think you're going to hear rumblings in the Clemson community, and I'll tell you what I do think. I think Swinney might go a couple of more years and then just leave on his own and just say, hey, you're not appreciating me like I feel like you should. I'm just going to leave. So I wouldn't be shocked. I don't think that Clemson would fire him. I think Swinney would actually say, hey, peace out. I'm done.
We talked in another video about player development. You just mentioned it there, how that truly has been lacking, and maybe an issue with DJU, and then an issue with Cade, and then offensive line and different things like that. But so much gets made about the portal, so we'll talk about it a little bit. I mean, they bring in good talent, but everyone uses the portal, right? Michigan uses it and won a chance. TCU used it. Florida State obviously won it. Florida State, the reason Florida State beat Clemson last year was because of the portal. The guys they got out of the portal that made a difference. Keon Coleman and Jared Verse and Braden Fisk and those guys. And I mean, Jordan Travis was there for a long time, but I mean, he was a portal guy too. And so how much frustration is there that Dabo won't use the portal? How much does it feel like he's fighting with one hand tied behind his back? You look at Keon Coleman. If Keon Coleman goes to Clemson as opposed to going to Florida State, Clemson wins that game by 3 touchdowns instead of Florida State, taking it in overtime. So I don't know. Just thoughts on the refusal to use it. Will that ever change? Will he get to a point where he has to? Just let's talk about the portal a little bit because everybody else does.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the portal is important. I mean, the game has changed a lot. College football has changed so much, and us traditionalists wants to see the game return to where we all know it's not going to return to anymore. With that said, to me, I am so blown away by the poor coaching development on the offensive side of the football that when I look at the portal, I'm like, yeah, sure, we should use it here and there. But what happens if we go use the portal and we bring in fill-in-the-blank players to take the place of poorly developed players, and they come in and then they flounder because, well, they don't have the coaching around them? To me, the main issue with Clemson is coaching on the offensive side of the football. I've said that over and over to the point that it's, my listeners are like, okay, Brian, we get it. It's like, no, when you fix that problem, you're going to fix a lot. Look at the defense. Again, my example. With the transfer portal, it would have been nice for us to go after. I've named this name. I don't know if he could have got into the school. I don't know if he would have came to the school. But Grayson McCall, the quarterback, the incredible quarterback at Coastal Carolina, who's only 3.5 hours from Clemson, he is now playing for NC State. We will have to play him, I think, on September the 21st. Would he have come to Clemson if we'd reached out to him? I mean, this guy has played 4 seasons. He's 6'3", 220. He can run the RPO like a man. He's unbelievable. He's a workhorse. He's the type of guy you want behind an offensive line that's not that good. That can, like you said in a video that we were discussing earlier. I mean, if you have a guy who can run the RPO well, you actually can fix or remedy some of those problems that you face with a poor offensive line.
Sure.
But we didn't reach out to him. But who did we reach out to? Oh, last year we got Paul Bear Bryant's great grandson, I believe who it was. I'm not knocking the kid, not making fun of him. But why did he come to Clemson? Oh, he wants to get into coaching, so we're going to make him basically, a graduate student who's dressing as a football player. Well, we did that the year before. We got former Clemson quarterback Hunter Johnson, who left here and went to Northwestern, played there for a little while. Well, he wants to get into coaching potentially, so he came back to Clemson. Those are, from right off the top of my head, I might have missed one, but from what I can remember, the only 2 times we've used the transfer portal. And it gets absolutely annoying to know that there may be someone like a Grayson McCall who could come in, do his thing, and give like Matt Luke some time to refine this just fix in some form this offensive line that couldn't even block a gnat last year by bringing in someone who is experienced. But yeah, that's frustrating. It's annoying. But once again, I go back to coaching. Coaching is the issue at Clemson. The transfer portal just adds more insult to injury.
Yeah, because it does feel like you could get some players out of the portal that could fix some issues. Like Keon Coleman didn't take any development, right? I put that on my channel this morning when we were talking about some of the funny stuff he said in the media. We didn't develop him at all. And that's no slight to anybody at FSU, but we got a very known commodity who was going to come in and be a first-round draft pick. Now, he went 33 overall, not 32. And I know we think of in rounds with the draft, but I promise you NFL franchises think in more linear terms. So for all intent and purposes, ended up being a first-round draft pick. We did no development. And so, like, even our bad coaching could not, and I'm not calling out any FSU coaches,
sure,
couldn't even have messed that up, because that guy was already a dude, and you just stick him out there and play. Caught 3 touchdowns in game 1 against LSU, and you were like, oh, well, this guy's for real. And so to me, and the other thing is with Dabo, not to pile on, so Clemson fans don't just, block me here on YouTube, but he's the only coach that takes this stance. Like, DeBoer uses it. Norvell obviously uses it. Brian Kelly uses it. Harbaugh was using it less. Ryan Day uses it. Kirby Smart, again, less, but they all use it. And so for him to be the only one that's like, no, we are not doing this at all, is, to me, that's what's most interesting, is everyone knows that you still build through high school. Like, no one's built a champion yet through the portal only. And I don't think that's what Clemson fans would be asking for. I don't think that's what anybody would be asking for. But to not use a tool or an advantage that you have just seems so strange to me. But again, maybe not the biggest issue, but when you have some of those other issues, some of those other deficiencies, to not remedy it with the portal seems weird. I'll give you an example. Florida State, I don't think, is an elite recruiting operation. They're just not. And I don't know that they're close to being one. I think some things would need to change for them to be an elite recruiting operation. That said, they're going to finish around top 10 every year. I just don't think they can be in the top 5 consistently. That's just my take. People hate me for that take if they're an FSU fan. And I'm like, well, results are what they are. And so, but they develop really well. You mentioned taking 3 stars to draft picks. They've done that. And they use the portal well. So they supplement. They understand, like, hey, we're not going to recruit like Georgia and Ohio State. That's fine. We're going to do other things really well. And so to me, that's the strangest thing that, again, if Dabo fixes the development, maybe it won't be a problem. But if he doesn't, I feel like he's fighting with a hand tied behind his back.
Sure. I mean, anytime someone is operating below what they used to operate at, like the level, of going to the playoff or, having this dominance. I mean, when you played Clemson at Clemson's prime, especially between, I would say, 15 and some people would say 2020. No, 2020, there was already some type of regression, but Trevor Lawrence and Travis Etienne and those guys, they were covering it up. And that's a whole other topic for another time. But during that time, you played Clemson, you had your hands full, and you were probably going to lose Just ask Bama. Four touchdown loss in Santa Clara. And so in the national championship. So when you see that and you have these irritations with Sweeney based on his coaching hires on the offensive side of the ball, which is totally different than the way he hires on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, it makes absolutely no sense. I always wonder if maybe one day he's sitting on the commode and he's having a moment of realization and he goes, hold on. If I started hiring on the offensive side like I hire on the defensive side, oh man, all my problems, Tyler from Spartanburg would be calling up and praising me. But it's just he gets really defensive about that. But when you bring up the transfer portal, I think it adds just fuel to the fire, the frustration of some of his stubborn ways that we've seen really, really infiltrate Clemson over the past 4 years. So it's just one more thing to annoy you.
Yeah. Brian, where can people follow you? Where can they find your work?
Absolutely. Clemson Football Live on YouTube. Drop me a line. Let me know that you saw me on TJ's show. And I love to have fun. Love to talk a little trash. We just try to keep it civil.
Awesome. I appreciate you, man. Thank you.
TJ, thanks for having me on.